Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Misek. I'm the co-founding partner of Framework Venture Partners. It's my pleasure to welcome Amy Dyck, our associate on the team, and a thought leader and expert in fundamental research. So this series is really about going beyond a simple blog, diving deep into an industry, understanding the main friction points, issues, and challenges facing it, and then really looking at what the future holds. So to that end, we've published our white paper on the retail renaissance in a time of COVID-19 this morning. And what we thought we would do today would dive into the results of that white paper. That white paper will be available on our website as well as through various social media. With that, it's my pleasure to welcome Amy. Amy.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Peter. Let me just share my screen here and we can get started. You can see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So like Peter said, my name is Amy Dyck. I'm an associate here at Framework Venture Partners. We want to thank everyone for joining us and listening to this presentation this morning. Now, before we kick off, we want to take a quick minute to thank the frontline workers for all their hard work so far. We hope that everyone listening or tuning in this morning is also staying healthy. So as you know, the world has now changed and divided into two realities, which is the reality pre-COVID-19 and post. Now, in the pre-world, we were actually writing a blog post about the future of retail and some of the key trends that we expected in the industry over the next 3 to 5 years. However, in the last few weeks, we actually overhauled this as the world has very quickly changed. So consumer behavior has been forced to change at an alarming pace, which is critically impacting retailers and their entire supply chains. So what impact has COVID-19 had? Well, in our opinion, the main impact was to dramatically shrink timelines and expedite the need for the full digitization of retail. So what does that mean? Well, prior to COVID-19, digital challenges for retailers were things like well-developed online stores, short delivery times, or customer service options in an omni-channel world. And now retailers have been thrown into a crisis, into a new world that demands the full digital capabilities for the entire buying experience. Now, we want to emphasize that we understand the struggle and difficulties that retailers now face. We know the world has changed. The drastic impact of COVID-19 will be felt throughout the retail industry, affecting both large and small retailers. And we're seeing this now. Even Amazon, as we just saw, announced it expects to spend almost all of its $4 billion operating profit in Q2 on coronavirus-related expenses, including tests for workers and building out its delivery network. Now, for many, especially the smaller retailers, the first step is to stabilize the business through whatever measure necessary. And while we understand these immediate and devastating threats, we do think that retailers can adapt and prepare for eventual acceleration when we emerge from this crisis. So the first step, retailers have to understand how consumer expectations have changed, what behaviors could remain in the post world, and then how technology can help. So the biggest question is, where do we go from here? So when we start to recover from this crisis, one of the most important things that retailers will need to consider is how will consumers shop? Now think about how we've already witnessed human behavior respond in irrational or questionable ways through this crisis. Toilet paper is obviously a great example. In March, toilet paper sales grew 231% over the last year, according to Adobe data. And interestingly, this exact same thing actually happened during the Spanish flu in 1918, but with Vicks Vapor Rub, where sales grew from 900K to 2.9 million in 1 year. Even the salespeople out in the field had to come back to work in the production facilities. So fear is contagious and it can lead to unpredictable choices, and some may actually outlast others. This is why we have to ask the question of how consumers are going to shop. So when stores open back up, things could be quite different. We can look to China for early signals of what retail might look like, but we view this largely to be short term. I'm going to admit this picture here is a stock photo because I liked how it looked, but you can imagine that this is what some stores in China looked like a few weeks ago. Early signals may give off the perception that the in-store experience is as strong as ever, at least for beauty or luxury items. LVMH and Hermes have reported impressive sales when they recently reopened. A flagship Hermes store took in 2.7 million on its first day of reopening, and LVMH's CFO stated that sales in stores in China were up 50% year over year. And typically consumers like to make these luxury purchases in store where they can physically see and touch the items, which makes sense. However, most industry experts are not as optimistic about this, and they're calling it revenge spending. There's some other views that many consumers have been holding off on spending their Chinese New Year gifts. Experts expect that this won't play out the same in North America, at least in the short term. We might see this sooner than later. In the US, Simon Property Group plans to reopen 49 of its malls over the next few weeks in 10 different states. But this is going to look different for a little while. Occupancy will be capped in each store, visitors can request a free temperature check, and staff will regularly sanitize locations, but it is promising. Now back home, if people want to return to normal, the brick and mortar channel could resurge, especially in local markets where consumers might want to support some of the SMBs that have weathered the storm. Or on the flip side, the newly developed fear of being close with humans might keep consumers buying through the online channels. While we think the overall experience might look different, we actually think the brick and mortar channel will play an important role and will be valuable in different ways. It's what we're calling the physical halo will continue to help online sales, and we think it can really help connect the omni-channel experience. So in our view, and what we outline in the white paper that we published this morning, is that there's 5 top trends that retailers need to address at a quicker than expected pace. These include omni-channel, data and artificial intelligence, omni-delivery, engagement and experience, and brand value. Now we'll dive into a bit more detail on each. So the first trend is the need for omni-channel. In our view, retailers need to have a physical presence at key locations, but this should be seamlessly integrated into a device for a neutral online experience. And we've seen the current retailers who do not have omni-channel are being pushed to evolve, and they more or less have to. Did you know that in the US, in just 2 days in March, e-commerce grew 25% from the week before? And we wanted to highlight an example of the omni-channel need and an innovative response that we recently saw. This is Shopify's new consumer app called Shop that combines discovery of local businesses, personalized recommendations, payments, and package tracking. Now, Shop was just launched to help these independent brands that may not be able to launch an app of their own, and it was released early to help these merchants with this new environment. It allows users to browse through and purchase products from over 1 million merchants on the platform. And for US customers, they can go to a shop local function, which allows them to search for brick and mortar stores that are close to their address to support these local businesses. To my knowledge, this function isn't available in Canada yet. You can trust me, I've already tried. But we think this is just one good example of an omni-channel evolution. Now, to some extent, we've already seen the evolution of omni-channel prior to COVID. Direct-to-consumer or D2C sales have been a key driver to overall e-commerce growth. These are digital-first brands that have been able to bypass the traditional retail channel to own the customer relationship. They collect and use first-party data and leverage personalization beyond what a traditional brick-and-mortar can offer. And this has allowed these brands to cut out costs while they can efficiently acquire customers. Some popular D2C brands include Casper, Allbirds, Everlane, or Gymshark, and they've really led the charge as there's now over 400 D2C brands that have disrupted these categories like apparel, beauty, or furniture. Not all D2C is from new merchants. We've also seen a lot of partnerships with brands like Sephora and Ulta and Target. And we've seen a lot of acquisitions in this space too, from brands like Unilever, which bought Dollar Shave Club, Procter & Gamble bought This Is Elle, and Fossil recently bought Movement. And additionally, contrary to their initial strategy, once these brands have gained share, a lot of digitally native brands then shifted to offline strategies. We've seen this through Warby Parker, which has over 100 stores, Bonobos, which has over 60, Casper, which has over 200, and Adore Me, which was planning 200 to 300 over the next few years. And there's other examples of omni-channel that we've probably all seen. Other online to offline strategies are things like the in-store pickup of products that you've bought online, the online purchases of products while you're at the store, and then when you're returning the online purchases to physical locations. This quote on the slide is actually one of my favorites, that even Amazon has stated that the distinction between physical and digital is increasingly blurring and now largely meaningless. So in the post world, we still think the in-store experience will be valuable, but it's going to be a very uncertain world. So the integrated omni-channel offering will be even more important. The other channel of omni-channel growth, other area, is through what's called frictionless commerce, which is a seamless, convenient buying experience through analyzing consumer behavior from apps, devices, and websites. Now, this is important as mobile commerce is expected to grow from almost half of all e-commerce purchases in 2019 to almost 75% by next year. So even though there'll be more purchases via mobile, traditionally, mobile conversion rates have actually been lower than desktop, and they have an estimated 10 to 20% higher bounce rate. So to solve this and to be truly omni-channel or frictionless, we think there needs to be an increased adoption of progressive web applications or PWAs and headless commerce strategies. And these are necessary to deliver products to any channel that will emerge in the post world. And channels might actually grow in unexpected ways too. As one example, we all know that humans crave interaction. Hero is a live chat app that recently saw a 500% increase in inbound requests as a result of COVID-19. Apps usage has also increased. You can see in the graphs above with the massive growth in downloads for Instacart, Walmart Grocery, Shipt, and Target. Another good example of a new channel could be voice technology. So previously, very few people actually use voice for shopping. There's only about 20% of consumers that ever really buy this way. But this has a huge presence, as there's almost 112 million people that use a voice assistant at least monthly in 2019. The biggest barrier for buying this way is trust, as most items that are purchased through voice assistants are small and quick items that you don't need to see or touch them physically. Now, in our current state, consumer staples have experienced a boom in demand. US GDP just declined in the first quarter, so we can obviously expect some lower discretionary spending. If behavior shifts, maybe a channel like voice could be the new routine way to shop for some of these necessities to help improve beyond the 20% adoption. And with over 100 million Alexa devices and more than 50 million Google Home devices sold, we think there's a strong possibility of this moving forward. Retailers need to keep all potential channels in mind, even if they haven't performed well historically. So this slide is just some key takeaways for the omni-channel. And so we continue to stress the importance of the offline channel and the now heightened need for omni-channel. We expect continued D2C growth, but also the potential for new buying channels like voice, apps, or even live chat. The second identified trend is data and artificial intelligence. Now, data is more valuable than ever, and we've all heard this. In our view, taps involving more than 1,000 permutations and instantaneous reactions have the potential to be AI augmented or AI driven. And as you can see, almost every organization's supply chain will be impacted by COVID-19. So simulation-based AI will be the most important, which we'll get to in a minute. And in fact, AI is already being leveraged in COVID-19 related use cases. In China, firms have introduced advanced AI-powered temperature screening systems in public places like subways and railway stations. AI-powered smartphone apps are being developed to monitor individuals' health and track the geographical spread of the virus. And AI is also being used to mine databases to find clues on what treatments might be effective. Now, for retail, one of our portfolio companies, Daisy Intelligence, delivers AI-powered solutions for retailers using reinforcement learning to deliver optimized merchandise planning. By looking at 100% of transactions, this decision-making leads to higher profits, sales, and ROI. Now, in this new environment, we think that retailers need to be able to understand how frequent price changes will affect demand and then what products they should be repricing. This requires consideration of the entire product portfolio and how sales of complementary and substitute products will also be affected. And as you can see, COVID-19 has broken customer shopping habits and historical trends, meaning that retailers can't really rely on historical trends to understand the current landscape and adapt to ongoing change. Successful retailers need to invest in the ability to scenario plan. Now, Daisy's reinforcement learning is especially needed when historical data is contaminated by these black swan events, which makes predictive, analytics-based AI marginally useful. Now, Peter, if you're there, I'll let you walk through this in a little bit more detail.
So typically the way artificial intelligence works is you expose algorithms to large data sets and you try and find patterns. We believe that the better and more precise way of performing artificial intelligence and machine learning in this new environment is to have a predetermined hypothesis and or reward function and test that against this new, smaller data set. So it becomes increasingly important to look at what the results are that are being literally minute by minute altered and reinforce those hypotheses that actually start to see efficacy. So in the new normal, what we're talking about here is having theories, testing those theories with as much data as you can, and then reinforcing where you see behavior matching this pattern. What you also have to do is you have to open yourself up to unexpected behavior. And so this is enabling a bit of a blend, and that's why we call it simulation-based AI.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. So to summarize for this section, data is more valuable than ever before. And with these dramatically altered purchasing habits and supply chains, there's a bigger need for simulation-based AI. So our third trend is Omni-Delivery. So in addition to the Omni-Channel, Omni-Delivery already existed in the pre-world, but this is exacerbated by COVID-19. Now, customer expectations on delivery speeds have also already been trending higher and higher, but the urgency for almost near real-time delivery has grown. Now, the one term we like to use to describe consumers is their liquid expectations. And we didn't make this up. We took this from a firm, a part of Accenture. And this means that consumer expectations have evolved from a given product category and now span across unrelated industries and experiences. So the simple user experience you get through ride sharing, like an Uber, or food delivery through Uber Eats, are now expected for all experiences, including complicated e-commerce deliveries. And as the slide says, largely thanks to Amazon, almost 40% of online shoppers now expect free 2-day delivery, and 27% of shoppers have abandoned an order if they don't have same-day delivery options. So this just adds to the liquid expectations. And Amazon has already set a high bar for quick delivery. As of January, Amazon revealed it has over 150 million Prime members, up from 100 million in April 2018. So I did some fun math. And this means that for almost the last 2 years, Amazon added 78,000 Prime members, or the population of a small city a day. And thanks partly to AWS, Amazon's able to fluctuate between periods of profitability and then high levels of spending, including its latest initiative, which has been to reduce Prime's 2-day shipping down to 1. Now, prior to COVID, Amazon spent just under $1.5 billion in the fourth quarter alone to improve its 1-day shipping. Think about how huge that is, $1.5 billion in 1 quarter. Now Amazon's obviously being faced with new challenges. We saw this in the last quarterly results and the fact that $4 billion of operating profit is being spent on COVID-related issues. But it is also worth mentioning that this past quarter was the first time that AWS revenue topped $10 billion. Now, before we can think going forward, at this point, it's worthwhile to explain what COVID-19 has done to current shipping and logistics networks. So for reference, the last mile is the final step in delivery from the distribution facility to the end consumer. And the barrier in the pre-world with the last mile was the cost and challenges of this. It can be up to 50% of the total parcel delivery experience cost. And some of the challenges with this are poor infrastructure, the cost of delivering B2B versus B2C, the types of goods delivered, and customer nuances, including things like cancellations, returns, high delivery times, and of course, these high expectations or liquid expectations. Now, COVID-19 has made this even harder. So tracking shipments to grocery and discount stores grew more than 50% in the week of March 23rd from the year before. And what this has done is caused huge spikes to restock shelves at an alarming pace. Well, at the same time, the retail and restaurant industry essentially shut down across North America, causing a huge drop in demand. So these swings have thrown freight networks off in a range of ways. Trucks moving shipments of perishables, cleaning products, and paper goods have had a hard time finding cargo to fill the trailers on return, which means more trucks are running empty. Inbound orders from the retailers of consumer staples are in high demand, while at the same time, the outbound orders to the consumer are also increasing. So the freight brokerages that arrange transportation are forced to bring in drivers from farther distances just to complete a pickup. And what makes it even worse is that truck stops have closed dining rooms along with the bathrooms, and drivers are having a hard time finding sanitizer, wipes, and protective gear just like everyone else. And then additionally, consumer demand for fast home delivery has prompted retailers to enforce what's called one-time in full programs, which penalizes suppliers for delayed or incomplete shipments. And this can create tension between the truckers and retailers. Not to mention, there's already been an aging labor force and a severe driver shortage. So while some of these issues may only be temporary, unfortunately, we think the last mile challenge might still persist in the post world. Now, in the pre-COVID world, we saw some margin compression by retailers as more funds were invested to meet these increasing expectations, and unfortunately, this may still continue. However, the advantage that many retailers have compared to D2C counterparts or the online marketplaces is that retailers can innovate using their physical locations and their dense store networks. Storing inventory in multiple locations puts merchandise closer to the consumer, which reduces transportation time and cost. Supply chains can also be evolved from single node to multi-node networks, and if need be, stores can be retrofitted as e-fulfillment centers to pick, pack, or dispatch orders, along with adding dark stores to position inventory closer to the end consumer. Now, as you can see, we've seen the growth of dark stores during this pandemic, especially for grocers that may have reduced hours, limited capacity, and a lack of slots for pickup orders. So far, Amazon has done this with some Whole Foods. We've also seen it with Kroger, Stop and Shop, and some Giant Eagles also experimenting with dark stores as well. Third-party logistics suppliers or 3PLs are also evolving to help solve the last mile. 3PLs fulfill orders for sellers and serve as a link in the supply chain to outsource part or all of a business's distribution and fulfillment services. There are now hundreds of 3PL providers, including Amazon's own Fulfilled by Amazon, or FBA. To compete with Amazon, eBay recently launched its own managed delivery, which allows sellers to store inventory closer to buyers in warehouses across the US. In 2019, we saw a similar offering through Shopify, which announced its Shopify Fulfillment Network, which is in head-to-head competition with Amazon's FBA. Now, this aims to provide 2-day shipping within 99% of the US and uses machine learning to determine smart inventory allocation to find the closest and most efficient fulfillment centers to reduce costs. And in the pre-world, retailers also considered the use of crowdsourcing apps to make same-day shipping cheaper through couriers like Instacart, Deliv, Stewart, or Postmates. These models have worked, but the economics are suboptimal with an average variable cost per delivery of $7 to $10. And in the post-world, these resources have been tapped thin. We've all seen the strikes and complaints from some of these workers recently. So for retailers, the sustainability of these models remains a question, and until then, the last mile has yet to be resolved. For the trend of Omni-Delivery, most of the pre-COVID takeaways remain the same in the post-world. Amazon's responding to its own issues, but it's still a dominating force. There's even more pressure on logistics networks, but 3PLs can offer new opportunities and cost reductions. The other opportunities lie in the brick and mortar locations and ways to use them to optimize the supply chain and delivery. The fourth trend is engagement and experience. So more than ever, consumers want to feel something from the retailer they buy from. And we think there'll be a new consumer-retailer relationship. So this photo is actually a picture I took in my condo building where I live. And I took this at Christmas near the concierge where packages are delivered. And there were so many boxes the staff couldn't see. And you essentially had to make a wall of boxes until people came to pick up their packages. And I'd never seen this before. And the reason I put this here is because I've actually seen stacks of boxes like this recently in my building. Maybe not as big, but this is due to most of the people stocking up on supplies, but there's also some levels of retail therapy that we're seeing. So with human beings stuck inside, retail therapy is actually a recognized activity, and it's been proven to make people happier, fight sadness and stress, and especially in times of uncertainty. Shopping gives humans a sense of control. Now, obviously, not every retailer is benefiting from this, and in a recession, there'll likely be fewer discretionary purchases, but we expect we'll see at least some relief through shopping. More importantly, and in the longer term, cost savings need to be made clear to the consumer. It was actually found after the last recession that although shoppers purchased less frequently and they spent more through deals, they were actually still quite loyal to brands, and they could handle price increases of up to 6% before switching. So to improve engagement, we think retailers need to leverage personalization. Now, in the pre-world, we were already seeing a bigger focus on this and a lot of experimentation, especially with AI on this concept. So personalization makes the consumer feel understood and cared for, and it works. You can see from the stats on the slide and some research from BCG. Shoppers who search and click on a recommendation are almost 4 times more to convert than those who just use a simple search. Another way for a consumer to engage more with the retailers is through augmented reality, or AR, which bridges the gap between the store and into the safety of the home. Now, many retailers were already experimenting with AR, allowing consumers to put virtual products in their homes or even on themselves. IKEA and Wayfair were among the first to offer AR for furniture and home goods. This used to be kind of considered a nice to have, but it's moving to more of a need to have. Sephora offers magic mirrors in its stores and mobile apps, and other beauty companies added these features a few years ago, and this is really more of a nice to have. During the crisis, it's reported that they've finally seen a rapid uptake of these digital and virtual solutions, including the growth of AI consultations and AR virtual try-ons. Now in China, there's been a rise of live streaming driven sales. The number of e-commerce live streaming sessions topped 4 million in the first quarter. So with live stream purchases, viewers can ask questions in real time and buy through one click. This is still early days, as this likely only accounts for maybe 2 to 10% of total Chinese e-commerce for now, as consumers still prefer to buy through traditional channels, as we saw earlier, and live stream buys are typically impulse. While buying through these channels hasn't fully taken off, retailers shouldn't discount these channels as they get some pretty impressive viewership. In February, consumers spent an average of 190 minutes a day on live streaming platforms. The famous TikTok averaged 45 minutes a day in 2019. And this is just another example of retailers trying to venture into the unknown through these new channels. Now, in the longer term, can VR offer the same emotional experience for shoppers? This might be far-fetched, but it actually could be closer than you think. The cost of the full virtual reality experience is expected to decline 15% per year, and this has been the biggest constraint so far. At the same time, 5G networks continue to be rolled out across the globe. 5G offers higher speed and lower latency, which means that more accessible applications of VR could be in our future. Given that we're in a world of uncertainty with very unclear timelines, retailers should consider these new ways to offer a connecting experience, even if it seems as though it's far away. Now, to summarize this section, in the post-COVID world, buying will be impacted by economical and psychological decision-making. There will be lower discretionary purchases. So while it might be hard, this means there's a bigger need for personalization and new ways to connect and engage with the target customer to give them a unique experience. Now, our fifth trend is brand value. So for retailers, the brand will be more than what values were instilled or represented pre-COVID-19, but it'll be about what the retailer stands for. So a crisis provides clarity to purpose, and a brand has to ask, what is its purpose? It's important that the retailer, and most importantly, that the customers know and understand this. While all retailers have the opportunity to act responsibly in ways that will be remembered in the post-world, grocery stores are one example that can do this immediately to reach the frontline workers, and we've seen some positive actions so far. There's been quite a few examples of other retailers responding in world-class ways. There are some that have not responded well, but this is usually because they're stretching the definition of essential. We're not going to highlight them here, but we want to focus on the positive. And there are quite a few that we've probably all read about, some of which are pictured here, but there's definitely others. And we think that Canadian retailers have actually responded really well. In Canada, distillers are now authorized to make hand sanitizer, and this is happening in other parts of the world as well. Among many others, in Toronto, Spirit of York has shifted from making spirits to hand sanitizer, and all proceeds are being directed to local food banks. Canada Goose is manufacturing scrubs and patient gowns at facilities in Toronto and in Winnipeg. Harry Rosen has repurposed its dress shirts to produce protective and fashionable non-medical face masks that are reusable and suitable for hospital visitors, discharged patients, and the broader community. In Vancouver, Arc'teryx is producing 30,000 medical gowns for local healthcare workers in BC. Then mattress company Endy has partnered with a hospital in Vancouver to donate enough mattresses, pillows, and mattress protectors for the doctors and nurses in the ICU and CCU. And Uniqlo Canada is donating 200,000 masks to high-priority medical facilities in Canada. There's some others on a more global scale that are worth mentioning we wanted to highlight. So Bauer Hockey is producing face shields for a break-even price of $6 each, and any accrued proceeds are going to charity. It's also posted these design specifications online for others to use. LVMH is using its production facilities of its perfumes and cosmetic brands to manufacture hand sanitizer and giving it to French health authorities for free. Crocs gave healthcare workers across the U.S. a free pair of shoes and donated another 100,000. And similarly, Allbirds distributed $500,000 worth of its wool runners to U.S. healthcare workers and added a buy a pair, give a pair option. And finally, Burberry is using its global supply chain network to fast track the delivery of more than 100,000 surgical masks and is retooling its trench coat facility to make non-surgical gowns and masks for patients. I think the key takeaways for this section are pretty self-explanatory. Do good things now and consumers will remember it. Now, longer term as a society, some of the implications from COVID-19 may allow us to question business practices and how things might have been in the pre-world. For retailers, we might question the safety of storefront employees and put further scrutiny on the health and safety obligations of the employers. So a big question for us is how can technology help this going forward? Now, in the pre-COVID world, we did see a recent push for unattended commerce or cashierless stores. And at the time, we thought it would be a focus point for the next few years. And the interest from this came about from the ability to lower operating costs and improve customer experiences by saving time for customers. Larger companies with the budget to experiment have used camera surveillance, facial recognition, and AI to pilot this technology. We've probably all heard of Amazon Go stores that allow consumers to pick up the items they need, walk out the door, and then receive a receipt of their purchase through the Amazon Go app. This is enabled by shelf cameras and sensors that track the items taken off the shelves. In February, Amazon debuted its first Amazon Go grocery store in Seattle, stocked with 5,000 products. At 10,000 square feet, the eventual plans are to expand Go stores to typical supermarkets that are around 30,000 square feet in size. Now there are 26 Amazon Go stores. Shortly after that, Amazon actually announced it would be selling its Just Walk Out technology to other retailers. Amazon has reportedly signed several deals, but not disclosed the cost of the system nor which customers have signed up. Until 2020, for most, I think unattended commerce was a fairly nascent idea actually experienced by very few consumers. I know I've never done this. And most retailers might have had a difficult time justifying these large costs, which does make Amazon's licensing concept a more appealing option, at least at the surface level. And now, cashierless commerce or touch-free shopping has become almost a necessity, or at least heightened in discussion. So while it's difficult to know, in our opinion, even more than ever, we think unattended commerce is likely to become one of the largest physical investments over the next 2 years. We may even see a quicker push for delivery drones and contactless terminals and payments. So going forward, some of the questions that we have to ask include things like, will we question the health and safety of frontline employees to the point that we can no longer put their lives in jeopardy? Will we repurpose these jobs to safer roles, or will they simply be replaced? Will brands with purpose step up on behalf of their own employees to protect them going forward? Now, in the post-COVID world, some business practices may change forever, and it's important to think where technology may play a role. At Framework, our focus so far has been supporting our portfolio companies through these challenging times. We know these unprecedented challenges have put immense strain on companies and their founders, but challenges often lead to opportunities. We continue to look for companies that have an opportunity to reduce friction while generating data that can be productized by AI. In retail, we still think this need is very large. These are companies that provide a value add to their customers. It's now mission critical, helps to maintain retention, and can drive incremental value. And combined, these qualities are crucial to building world-class companies in the pre-world and then now in the post. So at this point, I really want to thank you for listening. Take a look at our paper. We just published it, and I'll turn it back to Peter if he has any other closing thoughts, or we can open it up for any questions.
Thanks, Amy. That was extremely informative. I wanted to highlight a couple of things before we proceed to the Q&A. The first is, this will be the first of what we see to be a semi-annual practice for us. We will be researching industries in great depth, providing detailed white papers, and following up with webinars to help bring an overview to our white paper. Look for us to deep dive into these industries and then to refresh them on an ongoing basis. We believe strongly that fundamental research combined with world-class entrepreneurs enables for world-class outcomes. We're excited by the opportunity of working with these tremendous entrepreneurs and startups. These are challenging times, but in any great challenge, we see great people step up. So with that, I thought I would turn it over for Q&A. If you have a question, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a Q&A button. Please ask your question there. So our first question from Jose, how can retailers work to counteract the pressure of an aggregator like Amazon? Do you see anyone in the industry stepping up to do that?
Sure, I can take a stab at that. It's obviously a challenge, and it's been a challenge for a while. And when we first started writing this paper, a lot of the focus was on the retail apocalypse and things like Amazon coming in. But I think we've seen a bit of a resurgence, particularly through those D2C companies that I talked about. And a lot of them really work without Amazon. And we've seen that through some examples. Allbirds is one. Allbirds publicly stated that Amazon steals their logo or steals their the proprietary development, and then they actually operate outside of Amazon. And so there's a bit of a movement that way. And then we're seeing it through other offerings, like things like Shopify adding their own app that we just saw. And this is more or less competing with Amazon, but more of a move to support these local businesses. So it's challenging, of course, but we're seeing a bit of a shift. We're seeing people push back, and we're seeing a lot of negativity in the press these days. So we think there's still quite a bit of opportunity, and which is why we talk about things like brand value and then trying to think about how to increase engagement. And that can exist outside of Amazon.
Thanks, Amy. I would just add that if we think about a world, consumers aren't necessarily looking for one solution, one brand to deliver their experience. What they're looking for often is convenience in some cases. They're looking for emotional connections in others. And then they're looking for an entertaining type of experience. Obviously, we'll have to wait till a lot of these malls and retail facilities open for us to have that last one. But we look at the range of outcomes from various shoppers of various demographics. There is a tremendous need for someone to step up in an unbiased and neutral way to provide a platform to allow retailers to do what they do great. All right, our next question is from Stefan. If you can do one thing as a retailer with e-commerce, multi-channel or pure play e-commerce, what should it be?
I would say, first of all, make sure you have it at this point. Make sure it's as robust as it can be. There's obviously challenges, at least with setting it up, which is why we're seeing things like Shopify, again, that are really taking off. Make sure you're there for customer service. There's obviously been a lot of challenges. There's a lot of stockouts. There's a lot of things that are not available. So make sure you're there for that, because there needs to be a little bit of innovation right now, and it needs to be on your feet because there's a lot of things changing at this time. Peter, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'm of a belief that the vast majority of retailers benefit tremendously from a physical and e-commerce. The lack of e-commerce right now is an existential threat for many retailers. But importantly, as we begin to reopen up economies and look to a post-COVID world, the retail halo is something that we believe strongly in, and our research points to it. Human beings are unwilling to continue to sit in their homes and do all of their shopping. They want to be entertained. They want to have an experience. They want to have a connection, and they want that person-to-person communication. It is impossible to deliver that at this time in an e-commerce environment. That physical halo exists. It's real. We would strongly encourage retailers not necessarily to look at physical as an anchor, but rather as a halo. It is important, however, to have the right physical presence done the right way. What do I mean by that? We mean by having it aligned with the values of your brand and the experience and connection that you're trying to provide. What emotion are you trying to elicit from your customer? That emotion should line up throughout your entire store. If we look at one of the greatest retailers in our view that has done this extremely well is Apple. We see a tremendous amount of connectivity between the retail store, the online services, and the physical product, as well as the online store. So the combination of all of those wheels create what we believe is a powerful omni-channel experience. We have a next question here from Anonymous. What is the must-have technology needed in the e-commerce stack that may not have been prior to the pandemic? Amy, you want to take a first stab at that?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think on that one.
Yeah, I would say that the big one in our view that has really come to fruition is online search and discovery. If I were to tell you in e-commerce where we're seeing the most friction right now and what technology seems to be falling down in a tremendous way is the search and discovery function. I've talked through with many friends and family who want simple things now that they're stuck at home, but have been unable to find those things that match either the products they were able to buy in store or have confidence that what they're being displayed online is exactly what they're expecting. And this combination of factors really is something that's going to evolve in a greater way. And you think about this as a spectrum of items that you can trust simply because of the brand that you're buying and the repeatability of the purchase, through to the less frequent nature and the desire to have a physical-like experience either recreated or the physical halo applying. We have another question here from Igor. In the post world, do you see AR, VR commerce finally seeing mass consumer adoption, getting a retail experience without leaving the home? Amy, do you want to take the first stab?
Sure, I do. I mean, it obviously will take a little bit to play out. Like I said, we are seeing AR picking up, and what I highlighted was that this really was just sort of a nice to have for a lot of retailers. And you're seeing a lot of startups in the space, and we've been seeing increased adoption, but I think especially in the past few weeks, we've seen an uptake of AR. VR obviously is a little bit farther down the line, but like I said, the biggest challenge with this, or one of the biggest challenges, has been it's just been too expensive for people to have a full VR system in their home. So like most things, eventually when this becomes cheaper, we do think that'll pick up. We also think 5G will help this. And so there's definitely a potential for this. And some of the things that we talked about originally when we were writing this too is what Peter said about having the physical location. I mean, you can think about maybe 5-10 years down the road, who knows, maybe that experience, the VR experience, will happen in the retail store first. Maybe we'll go there, use it, and then eventually once the costs come down even further and it's developed further, we'll have this in the home. That one's a little bit farther, but it's just another way to engage with the consumer. And exactly, we are seeing a trend of how people are changing how they're thinking. And even though we still think the retail location is extremely important, it's good to think about some of these potential channels in the future too.
I would just add that I have the pleasure of having the newest Oculus headset at home, and the family has had a lot of time to use it obviously now. And I would say that the experience ranges from profoundly realistic to goofily clunky. And the profoundly realistic really comes down to scenarios that are enabled in such a way that they're believable and real in the context of where you are, in the context of movement that you're enabled, and the simplicity at which the interface is done. And so for VR to really work, it's not just the cost, it's also the software, the user experience, the usability. I believe, like Amy said, or we believe, like Amy said, that the first iterations of VR are likely going to be used in store, in dealerships, and in physical locations as they invest the CapEx required to bring the world to that physical location. And why would you use VR in a world such as a physical retail space? All of the items may not be available. All of the experiences may not be available. It's a way to augment the world to that physical presence. We have one more question here from Miguel. Are there retail technology solutions which may become obsolete post-COVID? Amy?
Good question. Let me think on that. Peter, is there anything that jumps to mind for you right off the bat?
I would say that cash. You know, the idea of the current POS, the tills, the payment terminals, how we stand to pay, I will make a bold prediction that the existing POS terminals are going to see an upgrade cycle unlike anything we've ever seen before. And the reason is that this virus is likely to be with us for a number of years. And the idea of physically touching cash and or even taking our smartphones and wallets and coming close to tap is going to create real risks and challenges. We think other technologies are going to become blended inside of the POS, such as QR codes, audio QR codes, low power Bluetooth, and other items. I believe strongly that physical distancing is not something that's going to go away overnight or even in the next 12 months likely. This is something we're going to have to deal with and live with for a number of years. And so having these points of failure or points of exposure the way they are, I think the biggest one is cash is likely to become obsolete.
Just to add on that, with Amazon Go, previously you had to use the Amazon Go to be able to check out with the items or to just walk out. And the last I read, they're actually removing that. So I believe it's through different apps that you can do this for that exact reason. People won't want to use cash, and they're trying to make this type of technology more accessible across all retailers.
So we have another question here from Peter. Do you envision business models shifting to more subscription services and or deployment of AI to help with repeat purchase of groceries? So we've got two questions here. Do you want to take a first stab there, Amy?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely a potential idea. And it's sort of what I talked about when we mentioned the voice technology in almost a similar way, is that once these are sort of the routine purchases that people are buying and they're more comfortable using technology to do these types of things. I mean, people didn't really use this before. So that could be something that we could see in the future. again, like Peter said, if people don't want to go in and use cash, or they really just don't want to keep doing what they were doing with grocery stores in particular, you could see an option for that. But, you know, it's hard to change that much within such a short period of time.
I think there's a bunch of products that we use in our everyday lives that have the propensity to be prone to subscriptions. I myself am a big believer in the Dollar Shave Club and other essential items that we use for personal care on an ongoing and regular basis. In terms of the grocery world, there is a lot of parallels. There are items that we need, and certainly when demand spikes, as we've been seeing now, that repeatability of that sale and the scheduling and logistics become increasingly important. AI is the only solution to the millions of possibilities that are facing all these grocers, whether it come from pricing, through to what, where, and how to stock items, through to the logistics and supply side. I cannot fathom how human beings are even able to approach these problems with spreadsheets and large pieces of paper right now, which is what they primarily use, or large clunky ERP systems that were designed in the late 90s or early 2000s that have very little capability to ingest real-time APIs. Why are real-time APIs important? Well, if you're trying to order toilet paper as a profound example, you might say, oh, we get toilet paper every week, this is how much we get. But if the factory is completely cleared of all of its work in process inventory, or the product is all in flight, meaning it's in the logistics network being shipped to various stores, the ability to restock, the ability to bring that product to the physical location becomes severely hampered. This is where reinforcement learning in this simulation-based AI that we describe is incredibly powerful. Imagine a team of people being able to solve this challenge. They just can't. The permutations are so large, the numbers are so large, that they are making profound and potentially fatal errors in their decision-making. It is critical to deploy technology to enable these systems to start to function more smoothly. And now adding the complexity of a deadly disease, it really, really brings us to the forefront. We need this technology. Human beings need the help. Right now, systems, especially the supply chain, are stretched. Thanks for the question, Peter. Any other questions out there? So with that, I wanted to thank everybody for their time. Our white paper is live on our website. We'll be posting it via the social media channels that we use as well. Want to thank you. Want to say a huge thank you to Amy Shimbavi and the team for months and thousands of hours of research that were basically done before COVID-19, and then spending thousands of hours more to update our thoughts and processes. And if we would leave you with one takeaway, the takeaway is that technology timeframes have been dramatically reduced. Where we once thought that it would take 5 to 10 years for retailers and for the industry to adopt that technology, we now believe the timelines have been shrunken to less than 24 months. We are seeing budgets on IT go from a nominal amount of total spend to becoming the largest single item of spend. This is not a must-have, or this is not a nice-to-have anymore, it's a must-have. A lot of these retailers are realizing the technological gap they're facing is an existential threat. But there are brighter days. Human beings have persevered through great tragedies and great events in the past, and I have extreme confidence we'll persevere again. So I look forward to brighter days and being able to see everyone outdoors. Cheers.